everyone, and welcome to Rainbow Stars channel, where today I was just going to touch on the subject of the George Floyd situation that has swept across the country. And I just wanted to give some of my thoughts on the new protest that just happened the other day. And I will say this, it happened at a very inconvenient time for me. Well, I mean, not the protest itself, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, the news had pulled up at a very inconvenient moment because I was like in the middle of a TV show. And I got very salty that they continued the broadcast for more than 20 minutes. Well, it lasted a long time. It actually fed into the next news. But I hate it whenever they would just repeat information. That's the only problem I have with the news. It's not that I don't like the information that I'm getting, because it's very important for me to know what's going on in the world. But then it's just one of those things where I'm just sitting there going, okay, well, you've already told us what happened. You told us a million times. You're not coming up with anything new. I hate this. I'm gone. So I got so angry because I couldn't finish my show. I know it's silly. I shouldn't have gotten so salty, but hormones being what they are, I get salty about a lot of things. But here we go. So after watching that news segment, I did have a lot of thoughts, especially on this new protest that happened over there in Dallas. And first of all, let me just say 100% what happened to him is a tragedy. And that, this whole thing with police officers being brutal or mistreating people, it's been going on for a long time. It extends to all communities, but more so the African American community. They face a lot more prejudice, a lot more racial profiling, and unfortunately, we do see more deaths happen in the African American community when it comes with police brutality. But that's not to say that they haven't gone into, that other classes are not also being affected by the same problem. I've heard about women, like this one girl was thrown into a jail cell and her face was smashed, and she was left there to bleed. And they didn't actually check on her for hours until they discovered her, and then they figured out that she had a broken jaw from what the guy did. She was drunk, but still, that's called excessive force. So, especially how he did it. How else would she have broken her jaw? What is he going to say? Oh, it was her fault. She just ran into it. No, you had to fling her into that thing. I'm just saying, and then, there are police officers that commit crimes out there as well. One police officer had actually kidnapped a woman, raped her in his vehicle, and suffice it to say that this is a broad spectrum thing, but with more focus on the African American community because it's so much more prevalent there. But there are occasions and also situations where police abuse their powers even toward the other communities as well. I think they're just given too much power to begin with. They think themselves higher and above the law. And it's hard to keep people in check when there are no repercussions for these crimes. Especially that man who killed George Floyd. He actually had a shooting, an unlawful shooting under his belt before, from what I understand, from what I've seen on the news. And he got no repercussions from it. So what does he do? He decides to sit on, literally kneel on a man's neck when he's begging him to breathe. Oh no, he could breathe just fine, he says on a video. He's talking. Just because somebody's talking don't mean they ain't dying. Trust me, I would know. I was actually put in a chokehold once by a guy. And let me tell you, when you can't breathe and you're asking somebody to let you go so you can, it's kind of meaning like you're basically about to pass out. You're literally, I was turning red in the face. I couldn't breathe. My sister came into the room and she's like, what the hell's going on? And separated me and the gentleman that put me in a chokehold. So after that, he was no longer allowed in the house, obviously, for many reasons. Yeah, it's kind of interesting how this can be allowed at all for any anyone out there. It's just, it baffles me. I rack my brain. I try to understand, but I can't understand that. And even more so, if I was one of those bystanders and I saw somebody doing that and I heard the man say I can't breathe, am I the only one who wouldn't like literally throw myself at these officers and push that man off of that guy's neck? Because, like, hey, you're just gonna have to shoot me. I'm pregnant. I'm white. And if you don't get off that man, why not civilian arrest these men? I mean, isn't that something we can do in this country? Can't you say you're under civilian arrest? Like, civilians can't arrest people, especially in Texas. It's one of our rights. We can arrest people. And why we don't exercise that just because we don't have training, I don't know. But, I would have wrestled that cop off that man. That just infuriated me when I heard about it. I was upset whenever I heard about it. But let's touch on this protest that I wanted to mention because I saw it tonight on the news. I want to give you my fresh opinion on how I feel about this. So, let's go. Well, apparently what happened was there was a peaceful protest going on in Dallas. It started off at some sheriff's department outside of a curfew zone, and they had permission to be there until like 10 o'clock. But they were told they apparently could not march. Yeah, you're allowed to protest, but you're not allowed to march, they say. Well, okay, they decided to go against that and they marched anyway. But they were still outside of the curfew zone. So really, they weren't breaking any rules at all. And hearing the people talk on the television just infuriated me because they're like, oh, there's a peaceful protest happening and these people are going. They had permission to go on the bridge. They said as long as you're moving, you're not impeding traffic, as long as you go across the bridge, you guys can go on your merry way, right? Basically, they allowed people on the bridge, and then they sandwiched them in between two police forces. So they basically said, oh yeah, you can go on the bridge, just keep walking. We're gonna get them. Basically is what happened. They set up a trap to trap these protesters on this bridge and threw like some kind of gas at them. I don't know if it was tear gas or what they threw. They said, oh no, it was just smoke, a smoke bomb or whatever. But I mean, just watching, I was sitting there thinking to myself, you can't tell me that that's not bad. It's terrible. In fact, I think it's actually unconstitutional what happened on that bridge. They even said they allowed the protesters on the bridge, and then they cut them off so they couldn't go anywhere. And they said, don't approach the police officers, which they weren't. The police officers approached them. So here we have a problem where it really shines bad light on the Dallas police officer community. Why? Because they're overextending their power. They're saying, oh no, we put a curfew in place, so you're breaking the curfew, but they're still outside of the curfew zone, so that don't make no sense. They're outside of the curfew zone. There's no lawful reason for you to be arresting these people. And there were over 200 people that were getting arrested. For what? Marching peacefully and not doing anything. And this person that was broadcasting it said continuously, oh, it was a peaceful demonstration until this moment. And I said, yeah, until the police came in and threw grenades and, like flash grenades or whatever they threw, smoke screen. I mean, that's terrible. And they're saying, oh no, the protesters are doing something dangerous. They're jumping across the bridge gap to the other bridge to get away. Well, what else are they supposed to do? They were explicitly told, don't go near the officers. They got blocked off by officers. And they don't want to get arrested. So some of the people will jump to the other bridge to go home without being scathed. I don't know. The whole thing, the way Dallas handled it was not correct. I do not believe it was correct. I believe that what they did was not only a breach of trust to the community, but also that show of force that they were using, bringing in the National Guard with riot gear on and all these vehicles to arrest 200 people because they broke a curfew in a non-curfew zone. Like they were outside of the zone of the curfew, so that it makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. So the whole thing's tragedy, and the public outcry is, in my view, expected. And a lot of people are taking this to violent extremes with rioting and all this stuff in different parts of the world, well, in different parts of the United States at least, from what I understand. There have been riots, there have been break-ins, there have been tagging, but that's not part of like the peaceful protesting part. Like that's a whole different animal. But those people, their outrage is warranted. There is a system here that's broken and has not been fixed for many a year, where police get away with murder literally on a daily basis. It's not just whites versus black, police versus black, it's police versus everyone. Police versus the world, basically, because they get on their high horse and they believe they're above the law and that they're unreproachable because they serve the public. And that's not how that works. You are definitely gonna be held accountable. And eventually, hopefully, our system will change so that we hold more police officers accountable for their actions. Because as it stands, they just get away with whatever they want. So, not only that, but do I believe the other people there that watched George Floyd die by the hands of their buddy, of their police officer comrade, and they didn't do anything? Should they be held accountable? Absolutely, they should be arrested. That's called the failure to render aid. At the very least, at the very most, accomplices to the crime. They just stood by and watched. Well, a man died. So, and they wanted to say it was medical complications. Let's get real. The medical complication was the man pressing against the guy's neck. And when you can't breathe for long enough, and your blood flow gets cut off from your brain, eventually you will die. Go figure, especially when it's over 10 minutes. Ooh, it just makes me so angry. So, I think that the outrage is warranted. I think that violence is not the answer. It's never the answer, but I think violence is understandable in this case because it's been a continual problem in our country and we're not fixing it. And whenever people aren't heard and their grievances aren't, fixed, eventually people get violent about it and they riot. That's what causes a revolution, is when nothing changes and people have to go around and get a little violent to get their message across that this is unacceptable, that we're not going to expect it anymore, that we're going to want them to take responsibility for what has happened. And even if they arrest the other officers, let's get real, there's still real changes that need to be made to our Constitution and or to the way things work, so the police officers all around the world, well, not all around the world, but all around America, at least, where we live in our country, that at least these officers take responsibility for what happens. Because as it stands, there are mistake shootings and, it's just a lot of crap that, if you research it, there are tons and tons and tons of cases that it's crazy. So should we hold police officers accountable? Absolutely. Just as, they're public servants, yes, but they're still part of the public. So why they get higher rights than everybody else does not make any sense to me. So, that's my piece on that. I believe that Dallas handled it terribly. And I think that they made a big mistake arresting 200 plus people. I mean, one, where are they going to house them all? They don't have enough rooms. They can't tell me they got enough room in their jail cell. They were just going for a shock and awe campaign, and all that's going to happen is that instead of 200 people marching, eventually there's going to be 1,000 people marching past curfew at the same place to make a point. So, I think they handled it poorly. The people over there in Fort Worth, however, they handled it spectacularly. The police officers down there actually knelt down in front of the protesters and shook their hands and heard their grievances, and the protesters were satisfied that at least this precinct heard what they had to say. They listened, they felt it, they understood, and they went about their merry way. They only had one arrest over there in Fort Worth, but that was because one of the individuals charged towards the officers like one does. The officers felt threatened and arrested the individual. But that's why I think that Fort Worth handled it better. One arrest versus 200. And you can't enforce no... I understand why they tried to make a curfew. I really do. They're trying to keep this under control so that rioting and breaking buildings and all that won't be a thing here. But at the same time, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, you want to keep that from happening, but by enforcing a curfew, you're also saying that people don't have their constitutional right to a peaceful protest past a certain time. People don't like to be told what to do. And especially like whenever you're trying to enforce it, sure, you can enforce it where it is due. But if they're outside of the curfew zone, you can't enforce a curfew outside of the curfew zone. That don't make no sense. I know you're trying to go for a shock and awe campaign, like, obey the curfew, but it's not going to work. So, it's a tragedy, and this whole thing's a mess, and I think that we really do need to have more laws in place that, you know, has it to where these individuals that do serve don't get better treatment than the rest of us. You know, if you kill somebody, if you murder somebody, if you rape somebody, if you hurt somebody, if you kidnap somebody, if you, you know, use too much force with somebody and hurt them. You know, there was this one police officer that I heard of. She cut off this one woman's weave with scissors, and that was terrible. And then she proceeded to stab another one later down the road, another individual, because she wasn't punished for that crime of, you know, basically strapping a woman down and cutting off her hair. So they're like, oh, no, that's fine that she did that. There's no law that doesn't state that you can't. But then she pulls out a knife, tries to cut off this friendship bracelet off of another individual, and that poor lady got stabbed. And, she, I don't know if she got punished for that either. I don't know if she got fired. I think she got suspended for that. So, do I believe that they need to be held accountable? Absolutely. Do I think that it's a major problem? Yes. Do I think that this protest is going to solve it? No. I honestly, there have been so many protests about this certain topic that I don't feel that that any amount of protesting is really going to help. I hope it does. I hope it helps, at least in this one case. But overall, the problem's going to stay. The overall issue of police, you know, having a higher... Am I anti-police? No, I'm not anti-police. But I do believe that they get special privileges and that their buddies in blue do cover for them often, and that not enough are being held accountable for the actions they take. And even when they do, whenever they are held accountable, they don't face the maximum of that penalty. They always get like a smack on the wrist in some way, shape, or form. And then if they do get sent to prison, it's federal, which is not the same as public prison. And the reason being because they can't really throw a police officer in prison, because they will literally be killed in one day if anyone found out that they were an officer before. Because, you know, people don't typically like the people that arrested them to be in the same prison as them. So, yeah. So I can see where all of this is like... an issue. I just think the underlying problem will remain until somebody in power stands up. I'm not saying the police chiefs, I'm saying somebody above them. Somebody above that branch of, you know, somebody from the FBI or above. Like, I'm talking, it would have to be a structural change. Somebody has to monitor these police officers. Somebody has to hold them accountable, and not the police stations themselves, if that makes sense. If a crime is committed from an officer, I believe that it should be always an investigation conducted outside of that precinct by somebody else. Because the police often look out for their own, and if it's one precinct that's basically looking into its own problem, then of course justice won't be served. So anyway, I believe there has to be a overhaul from above for this to happen. I think that only by government means would we be able to fix it. And I don't know how we're gonna fix it. I really don't. Like, I feel like this has been an ongoing issue for so many years, and even before now. It's not just a race thing. It's a human thing where people are given too much power. They're not regulated properly, and that's the problem, is they're not being regulated. And so they do what they want, and they get away with it, which I don't agree with, but you know, it happens a lot, and I'm hoping that eventually we can fix it. I don't know if this protest is gonna fix the world or not. We've had so many. I don't know if we can completely erase racism, though I hope we can. Because honestly, I just see people as people. I don't see people's skin tones. I really don't. I consider us all part of one human race, and I don't believe that one community should be better than the other, or any of that snap. So, so yeah, I think that the whole thing is frustrating, on behalf of that family, and I believe that those officers should have been immediately arrested, not later. And I think that, honestly, I wish that I had been there to help that man, because when I watched that video, it made me so angry. I was so mad, and I was just surprised that I understand people are afraid of the police. They should be. They rush them, you'll get shot or tased, one of the two. But I don't know, I would have taken a bullet to help him. If he would have lived, you know. But that's just me. I'm a little crazy. So, yeah. And let's face it, police officers who shoot a white pregnant lady would probably get more punishment. I just don't understand. I don't understand. It just makes me so mad. So I just thought I'd share my views on it. The whole situation's terrible. I hope the protest does help in this one instance. I hope that eventually change does happen. But we're going to really have to go to the government heads about this. Because without proper regulation on these precincts, we're going to have a lot of issues with this problem continuing to happen. So, but yeah, I hope that he gets, you know, the family gets due justice. And I hope we can stop this from ever happening again. Because I feel like I'm sad that I live in a country where this takes place. Home of the free, debatable. I don't see us as anything free, that's for sure. We have freedoms in many respects, but you know, if you're part of a different class, all of a sudden, you know, I just don't get it. I don't understand people. So anyway, I just wanted to give my viewpoints on that. Dallas handled it terribly. Minneapolis is handling it terribly. I mean, I honestly believe that had people done something about this topic sooner, maybe people wouldn't be rioting and looting and, you know, defacing public property. I'm just saying that the public outcry is understandable and, in my view, justifiable. Do I think that the violence is a good thing? No. Do I think that it helps anything? No. But, I'm just surprised. I'm just surprised that this whole thing's a thing. So, anyway, I'm hoping for the best for the family, and I feel terrible it even happened. And I do think that, I don't think we should try to force people to not protest this, because I think they have every right to protest it, at least peacefully, if nothing else. We have a right in our country to a peaceful protest. So, yeah, and especially like if we have some people that are out there rioting and doing all these other violent things, I think that those individuals obviously are in the wrong. But should the rest of the protesters and the message die because of a select few individuals who go crazy about this? No, I don't think so. But I mean, I'm hoping this problem does get solved, but my personal opinion, I don't see the underlining issue of police being above the law disappearing overnight. I think it'll be something that we're going to have to work on for many more years yet to come, to get them under control. Because from where I'm standing, I'm not seeing much progress, at least from the view of the public, especially when the police decided to tell them, oh, you're allowed on the bridge, just keep moving, don't approach the officers, and then they block them off and basically corral them like cattle so that they can arrest all these people. I don't agree with that. I don't. So, especially since they were outside of the curfew zone, so like the whole thing was unconstitutional. That whole thing should not have happened. They should have been allowed to do their march, to do their protest, then to go home, especially since it was peaceful. So, whatever. The whole thing just bothers me. The whole thing, like the fact it even happened, bothers me. The fact that a man had to die for this topic to be brought back up again bothers me. I think that we should have been on top of this a long time ago. Maybe that man wouldn't have been dead, because the other officers would have been fired long before, when they had a shooting. They shot somebody to death, and I just don't get it. So anyway, remember, when you view peace, love, unity, and respect, and please remember that Black Lives Matter, and that we do need to hold people accountable for their actions, even if they're in blue. All right. You guys have a peaceful day, and I hope that everything works out and that people are in good health, and hopefully we can resolve this matter in some way or capacity without any more pain. So, all right, guys.